The Barbarous Relic. However honorable, those who advocate that gold or energy or any such physical reference commodity should again become the touchstone of money, are participating in the quaint hope that human iniquity might be resisted by monetary policy. Power, the ability to do work, is the quintessence of desire. Anything that functions as money is power in its liquid form. The illimitable appetite for power tends, therefore, to be coextensive with an appetite for money. Rulers' interest in power has always had them attempting to monopolize the creation of monetary symbols, and to use their police powers to enforce the exclusive use of their symbols of value as legal tender. The state's monopoly on coinage is, therefore, always being used in service to the state, whether to preserve economic order, to forestall immediate hazards, or to sacrifice order for the benefit of narrow interests. Power elites have historically favored gold as the reference commodity for their money because, until recently, there existed no techniques for gold's adulteration. When the money price of gold has settled at a more or less constant cost for discovering and refining gold, a currency is stable. But things can become interesting when the monetary costs of producing refined gold become unstable. There are, for example, historical instances to be cited, wherein the characteristic appetites of elites have upset the economic order. Throughout the 16th century, Habsburg Spain thought it was importing actual wealth in the form of easily acquired South American silver and gold. In fact, they imported considerable ruin by inflating what our modern gold bugs would call sound money. We should also realize that gold, even while remaining a scarce commodity, can, because it is a commodity, be cornered in order to extort real value from productive people. It is alleged, for example, that the American banking cartel conspired to continuously withhold gold-based currency from circulation at several points in the late 19th century. This accelerating deflation of gold-backed dollars operated to the effect that farm produce could not be sold for amounts sufficient to redeem outstanding farm loans that had been issued earlier in terms of less valuable currency. Insolvent farms were then foreclosed, and their former owners became tenants of the bankers. Prospects for a successful return to the physical gold standard are also contraindicated by modern advances in metallurgy and numismatics. Certain agents, mostly domiciled in China, are presently flooding the world with adulterated gold ingots, fake rare coins, and bogus certificates of deposit for non-existent bullion inventories. And even if gold and coinage were still difficult to counterfeit, who might authoritatively audit the world's huge depositories of gold, especially in the event that the authorities themselves had need of a false account? The last public audit of Fort Knox occurred in the 1950s, and that amounted to nothing more than a walkthrough by several congressmen. No disinterested party has, within living memory, counted or assayed all the ingots deposited there. Though the New York Fed offers carefully curated tours that include its vaults beneath 33 Liberty Street in Manhattan, no disinterested party is ever allowed more than a brief viewing of the gold deposits. This, even though repatriations of the foreign bullion deposited there are becoming mysteriously complicated. Indeed, in matters of money, it is difficult to imagine how there might be such a thing as a disinterested party. Whatever the integrity of reported deposits of physical gold, it should be clear that the abstract representation of those deposits, as they are currently being transacted, have been tremendously inflated. In early 2022, total central bank holdings of gold are worth approximately $1.8 trillion US. The total worth of all the gold ever refined is approximately $11 trillion US. Total gold derivatives worldwide would presumably be worth $1.5 quadrillion US, upon complete liquidation. In all, it is well indicated that a financial crisis sufficient to cause a run to gold would also precipitate chaos in markets for specie. Those still finding comfort in their stocks of, and titles to, precious metals might usefully consider U.S. Executive Order 6102. In mid-1933, President Franklin Roosevelt decreed that it would be illegal for U.S. citizens to possess gold, or any paper currency obligating the U.S. government to issue physical gold. The sovereign power of the United States, abruptly and by direct fiat, repossessed all symbols of ultimate value, and all instruments representing value in that form. For the 100 years prior to 1932, the dollar price of gold had held at almost exactly $20.67 per ounce. In April 1933, the gold certificate at the top of our illustration and the Federal Reserve note at the bottom could both be exchanged for 2.419 ounces of gold. On May 1st, it became illegal to hold gold and gold certificates. 8 months later, gold was revalued at $35 per ounce. There were no gold certificates in circulation, and a $50 Federal Reserve note would then purchase 1.429 ounces of gold. In 1934, that $50 Federal Reserve note became worth $29.54 in terms of the value standard prevailing less than a year earlier, and the U.S. Treasury essentially pocketed the difference. The dollar remained stable at $35 per ounce throughout the Depression and World War II. Its story again became active in 1944 when an international assembly at Bretton Woods decreed that the U.S. dollar would become the global reserve currency. International trade would thereafter be settled through an exchange of U.S. dollars, and exchange rates among national currencies would be set in relation to the U.S. dollar, which continued to trade in open markets at approximately $35 per ounce of gold until 1967. The United States' determination to simultaneously fund its Vietnam War and its Great Society programs caused the U.S. economy to falter in the mid-1960s. Within a few years, it became impossible for the U.S. currency to properly fulfill both its domestic and international functions. In 1971, President Richard Nixon severed these obligations by discontinuing the federal government's exchange of gold for dollars at any artificially low or fixed price. In doing so, Mr. Nixon asserted that we are all Keynesians now. This in apparent reference to Lord Keynes' characterization of gold as that barbarous relic, while he was essentially dictating the proceedings at Bretton Woods. Having the world's attention focused on his financial pronouncements, his lordship had proposed an entirely artificial reserve currency, the Bancour, conceptualized by Keynes and Schumacher between 1940 and 1942. This Bancour would denominate national accounts held by some sort of successor to the Bank of International Settlements. Moving units of the Bancour among these accounts would replace the moving around of gold ingots in underground vaults, or the physical transport of ingots among nations as the means for settling transactions arising from international trade. Keynes' Bancour proposal failed, and it was decreed that international settlements would thereafter occur in terms of dollar-denominated financial instruments. If we may presume that the assembly adjourned with an expectation that the dollar would maintain its near-constant convertibility to gold, then it can be said that the barbarous relic persisted as the world's international reference commodity. When the dollar began inflating freely in 1971, the arrangements concluded at Bretton Woods began to lose their integrity. Thereupon, a new global reserve currency, having some resemblance to the Bancour, emerged in the form of petrodollars, thereby replacing gold with petroleum as the universal reference commodity. This was not accomplished by international consensus, but by the United States' resolve to punish any nation that tried to purchase its oil imports with any currency other than the U.S. dollar. Such an arrangement might suggest comparison to our tale regarding the inception of coinage. Recall that the hypothetical sovereign of this story forced his productive citizens to do business with his soldiers in order to acquire the legal tender in which the citizens' taxes were to be paid. Similarly, if nations can only pay for their oil imports with U.S. dollars, they must sell their exports to the United States in quantities sufficient to acquire the dollars they need to purchase their energy requirements. The United States has thereby acquired the leverage to, in some degree, dictate the prices it pays for its imports, and to use the proceeds of this advantage to continue its foreign military adventures, as well as to purchase tranquility from its increasingly unruly population. As is ever the case with such dictatorial powers, the power tends to be abused. Populations outside the United States are more and more coerced into exchanging physical value for dollar-denominated instruments that are deteriorating in value. Thus, the U.S. trade deficits are being balanced to an increasing degree by what amounts to the export of its tendencies toward domestic inflation. History shows us that any form of social organization, no matter how well-intentioned or ingenious, can be corrupted to the advantage of narrow interests. And such has always been the case for every known representation of value, whether physical or abstract. There are no substitutes for an alliance of power with intelligence and honorable intentions. A monetary unit establishes stature by demonstrating stability while being freely traded over an extended period, not by force, threats, or legal maneuver. Where a national currency, such as the Byzant or the Venetian ducat, has provided the global touchstone of value, it is owed to the determination of a lengthy succession of benign rulers who combined political good fortune with the will to defend their state's coinage.